SmallRig has been around for more than 10 years now, and in those 10 years we've done a lot. Mainly that has been in the camera accessories market. I think what we're famous for are camera cages, our side handles, our top handles, much more. But recently, SmallRig's really been branching out into other types of filmmaking accessories. The goal of SmallRig is really to provide the easiest of use to filmmakers and really help them solve their creative issues. As a brand, SmallRig has more than 1,000 products worldwide. We also have hundreds of dealers servicing thousands of SmallRig users all across the globe. Now recently, more and more of those users have been asking SmallRig, when are you going to make some type of larger video light? I love your camera cages, your top handles, your side handles, even your pocket LEDs like the M160, which I have here. They're all great products, but I really want to see a larger video light. The smaller pocket LEDs are great, but it can be tough to light a larger scene with them. Lighting is a key component of any commercial, film narrative, documentary, any kind of set. Even when you're outside and shooting in the sunlight, the sun is still a source, and you have to think of it like that. You really need to light your scenes. Even going on right now, we have over 4 lights that are up here. We have a key light, we have a backlight, and then we have a light that's creating our projection of the SmallRig logo on the wall. Lighting is truly key in any filmmaking scenario. Now with that, we're in a true renaissance of lighting now. Behind me, you'll see an old school 2K. Those are really heavy, weighing about 25 to 30 pounds, and used a lot of energy, so you can only plug in so many at a time. Now in the modern day, we're at a true great point in lighting. With the development of LEDs, we now have the ability to really be way more efficient. We have lights now that weigh only 1/10 as much as the old ones. They output more light for less electricity. So really, you're at the best time now to be a filmmaker as far as lighting is concerned. And the best part is, the lights are now more affordable than they've ever been. So you really have the best way to enter into this world. And that's why I'm so excited to be here today. I am proud to introduce SmallRig's first chip-on-board, point source LED video light. Hi everyone, Will Hahn here, and I am so pleased to be here to introduce you to SmallRig's first ever COB video light. Now, first and foremost, what is COB? Well, it stands for chip on board. Well, a lot of you might be familiar with LED technology as it's been around for a number of years now, but COB is really what's revolutionary for filmmakers. Chip on board means the light is a single point source, so the chip is just one large piece. That's really important because it mimics what the old tungsten bulbs were like. With those tungsten bulbs, you were getting a single hard source of light, and in filmmaking that's really important to achieve because it gives a natural look to, say, the sun. Now with the early LEDs, they were a great resource because they consumed a lot less power, but they were all single individual chips that were all laid out together on a common board, for example. But the problem with that is you had multiple shadows going all different directions, and it really wasn't great for filmmaking. But with COB technology that mimics older bulbs, it really gives a natural look to how film lights are supposed to be. That's why COB is so important. Now let's dive on in and let's talk about some of the features about our video lights. We'll get to our accessories a little later on in the video, and then we've got a fun surprise after that. So starting off with the main features of the video lights from SmallRig. Well, the main first feature is that there's going to be 2 different models. We're going to have the RC120D and the RC120B. Now, the 120 stands for the actual wattage of the light. It's a 120 watt point source LED video light. The B and the D are our different models. The D being daylight, and it's balanced at 5600 Kelvin, or similar to the color of the sun, and the B being bicolor. So you have the opportunity to go from your warmer color temperatures, such as 2800 up to 6500 Kelvin. That gives you a wide range of shooting options. If you are in an environment that needs to have tungsten light, you can adjust to that. And if you're go outside and you're in an environment of daylight, you can adjust to that. And it really gives you a lot of flexibilities instead of having to reach for things like gels. In our test, these lights achieved a CRI of 96 plus. In reality, the CRI is actually higher, but for our tests and our marketing purposes, we're gonna say 96 plus. That's a really important stat. You always want a video light that has a high CRI score. The RC120D has a reading of 62,600 lux at 1 meter with the reflector on. That is really bright. The RC120B, which is what I'm standing next to here, had a reading of 52,800 lux at 1 meter. That's also with the reflector on the lamp head. Now, that's important, and the reason it's slightly lower is because the 120B has two different types of chips. It has the daylight and the tungsten chips. So you're actually gonna get your brightest output right in the middle of those, about 4,700 Kelvin. That's because on the daylight spectrum, you're gonna be using the one set of chips, and at the tungsten spectrum, you're gonna be using the other set of chips, but right in the middle is where you're gonna get your brightest output. In the box, what is included is a 6-meter long power supply. That includes the 2 lengths of cable that make up the power supply. You have the option to purchase a V-mount battery plate with the specialty cable for an additional charge, which we'll talk about later in the accessories. Having these options with the light is great because in the box you have a nice long power strip, so you can be powering it off house power from a very long distance away. And with the ability of being able to purchase the V-mount plate as an additional accessory gives you the flexibility to use it in many different situations if you're out in the field and don't have access to house power. As you can see in some of our tests here, we were using the V-mount plate to run around with our Steadicam, so we didn't have to have cables dragging around. It really worked great. Now let's talk about a really big feature of these lights, the ability to do app control through Bluetooth on the Gobo app. What's great about that is I have tons of control options here. So let's talk about them a little bit, and we'll talk about them more later. First and foremost, I have brightness control. As you can see, it's a really bright light. Even from just controlling it here, that's about 50% brightness right there. Since this is one of our bicolor models, I have the ability to change the color temperature. There's cooler up to warmer, and I'll put it right back in between. It's extremely seamless to use. And if I go over here, I even have the ability to access built-in effects. There's things like flame, TV, firework, tons of different options here for working with the light. And I'll go back to TV so we save you all. Included with these lights is an extremely sturdy carrying case. Especially at this price point, it's great to see there's a sturdy carrying case, because if you're going to be using these lights out in the field, you need a case you can really depend on. You need something you can stack stuff on and know that it's going to be dependable and keep your lights safe. In the lamp head itself, there's a fan. Anything under 60 degrees centigrade, that fan will remain off. Anything above 60 degrees centigrade, that fan will turn on to help cool the COB. What's great about that is that if you are working in a small environment and you're worried about some of that fan noise bleeding into your microphones, you're really not going to have it. Here we have multiple fans running in this studio, and I'm sure you can tell that there's no noise. Featured in these lights are 10 built-in effects. You saw them earlier when I was demonstrating a couple of them on the Gobo app. There's lots of different ones like faulty bulb, TV, paparazzi, and more. Now, what's important about having these built-in effects is that it gives you more control as a filmmaker. If you're shooting a scene where you need a character to watch a TV and you want to see that light, on their face, well, you don't want to have an actual TV running on set. By having one of these lights with some diffusion on it to mimic what the soft glow of a TV at night, it really is going to give you more control over your image. And at the end of the day, as a filmmaker, the more control you have, really, the better. Now, each of these effects has a frequency of 1 to 10, and they can all be dimmed with the brightness of the light. Now with that, the effects can be controlled from either the small Gobo app or from right back here on the lamp head itself, and I'll touch base on that in a couple minutes. Right here is a universal Bowens mount. That's incredibly important because our accessories are all Bowens mount, so they're going to be quick disconnect right onto there. Now that's also great because that means that you can use accessories from other brands as long as they have a Bowens mount. Same thing with our accessories, our modifiers. Those modifiers could be used on other lights. As long as all the accessories you are using have a Bowens mount, they can be used with this system, which is great. Now another thing about attaching modifiers is the built-in umbrella holder here. That's something that's really overlooked, but especially at this price point of light, especially with content creators, smaller creators, you might reach for something like an umbrella because it's a lot less expensive modifier, and they still give that soft image and light, which is what we really crave as cinematographers. So what's great is that this light has a built-in umbrella holder right here. But the second you want to go for some bigger modifiers or different types of accessories, we have that ability, and we're going to be showcasing a lot of them here today. But for now, if you want to see just how easy it is to install these modifiers, this is how quick I can install the included reflector. That's how quick you can quick disconnect and change to a different modifier. And speed is incredibly important on set. Now let's talk about controlling the lamp head from the lamp itself. I'm going to spin it around here so you can see nice and closely the back of the light. Here we're powering it off a V-mount plate, which is the optional accessory, which we'll talk a little bit more about later, but it goes up into a nice 3-pin XLR here. On the back here of this RC120B, you can see 2 knobs. Now here on the left knob is how we change our brightness and our color temperature. As you can see, just a quick tap in on the knob changes it from the brightness to the color temperature, which is super easy control. Now, the same thing goes for our effects on the right-hand knob here. If I want to change the frequency of the effect, I can do so right here. And if I tap in on the knob, it takes me over to the menu to change to one of our other 10 built-in effects. And then if you put the light back to normal, just like that, it goes back to its normal mode. And if I turn up the intensity of the light, that's how you operate it from the back screen. And that's super convenient and super intuitive. It really won't take you long at all to get the feel for these lights and really light your scenes better. And now let's move on to talking about really the biggest question of today, the price of these lights. Now, for introductory filmmakers, someone that's new to this and is just getting into video lighting, these are a great light for you. Even if you're a professional, these lights are still a great choice for you. They're robust, they're well made, and they can really take a beating. We've had them in ice rinks, on interview sets, and they've held up really well. What's great about them is they're still lightweight, so they're easy to carry, so you can hand hold them, but they're still really powerful and can do a really nice rim light outside. But for the price, the daylight RC120D is going to come in at $219 US. And for the bicolor, the RC120B, the price is going to be $259 US. At that price point, for the features you're getting and the quality you're getting out of these lights, it's really hard to beat. It's going to be a great light for first-time filmmakers that are just starting to build their kit, but it's also going to be a great accessory to a larger kit for anyone that's a more professional working off a grip and electric truck, or someone that just needs a more flexible light. This is a great light to add to your kit. It has all of the build quality you would expect. At the same time, it has the power options, has the output, so it's a great light for all different types of sources. Here I am holding the RAL65, our lantern. This is a great modifier because they produce extremely soft sources. Now, that's really important because as a filmmaker, you really need to soften your light. So if you're doing any type of scene where you need to, say, mimic the moon, this is a great modifier that just stick up in the sky and have ambience come from all around. That's the great thing about lanterns, is They're not exactly directional. They really put ambience in all different spheres emitting from this light. I really like to use lanterns because they're just extremely soft. The light does not really ever get softer than this. So this is our first accessory, the RAL65. I'll be talking about the price of all of the modifiers at the end of this section. Now our second modifier here is one of our light domes. We're going to have two sizes of light domes. This is the RAD55, or a 55 centimeter light dome. This is the smaller of the two, and this would be a great light dome if you're in a really small space, or you want to use this for your backlight, because sometimes it's even good to soften your backlights. There's two different types of diffusion. There's an internal one, and then the external one, which you can see right below this grid here, and then the grid. So what the grid is great for is it focuses your light. That's really important because once you soften a light source, it's really going to want to go all different ways, and you really don't want spill all over your set. So by putting your grid on here, it's going to help focus that light back onto where you want it to go. Now, it does cut down on some of the exposure actually coming from the light, but it really is going to help you focus your light beams, which is way more important. Like the larger light dome, this is also quick release and quick setup. So if I take off the Velcro here and I collapse it down, it's really easy to quick up and it's ready to go. So they're super easy to set up. Now, these are pre-production models here. The final models will be out very shortly, but for the filming of this video, I have the pre-production models here. There will be some key differences on the final version of these modifiers. The two light domes specifically, they will have external rods instead of the internal ones you see here. But for the purposes of demonstrating what we have coming out, you will still get a 55 centimeter light dome if you were to purchase the RAD55. But now let's move on and let's talk about the larger light dome, the RAD85. Now, here we have our largest accessory, the RAD85, an 85 centimeter light dome. Now, why would you choose the RAD85 over the RAD55? Well, simply, the larger your source is, the softer it's actually going to be. So if you're doing any type of key light situation for an interview, which we're actually going to demonstrate a little later in this video, you want something with a larger diameter here because you're going to get a softer light. Instead of doing something simple like a 4x4 silk to help cut down on the sun, we might put up something as large as 12 by 12 to really help cut down and create a really soft light. Same goes for when you're lighting inside. So having something that is a larger source like the RAD85 is really great because it's going to give you that softer light. Like the 55, this is still going to have multiple different types of diffusion. It's going to have an internal diffuser, an external diffuser, which you can see here, and it also comes with grid. I just have it set up a little different so you can see the different capabilities of each modifier. Here are the final versions of our modifiers. The main focus on the final modifiers is the external steel ribs, as well as the one-piece design. The external ribs allow for a rounder internal shape of the dome. Now, the one-piece design is key because unlike other domes on the market, there is no need to adjust Velcro flaps on the top of the dome. By eliminating these flaps, the one-piece design not only makes for a faster setup, but also a far easier setup. But if you also look on the inside here, you can see one of the great features of this light is the fact that it has this really shiny surface on the inside. Now, what's great about that is it's going to give you extra reflection out and give you a little bit more output. And it's going to help reflect some of those soft light rays back out. Now, that's really important, and that's why these modifiers are so special. Just like the 55, the 85 also has the quick disconnects on the back, as well as the Bowens mount. All of these accessories are Bowens mount capable, so they can work with our lights, they can work with other lights, as long as you have the Bowens mount. That is what's so great about these modifiers, is that they're universal, and it's really, useful for a long time. Now let's talk about the final accessory that is available to purchase with these lights, the V-mount plate. What's great about this is it gives you the added flexibility of battery power, like I talked about earlier, and you'll see in some of the behind-the-scenes footage. Now, what's great is that it runs off V-mount batteries. So having the ability to not run house power and power your light just on this battery right here is a really great use. You can attach it to the light stand with this clamp right here. That gives you the added flexibility to really run with it if you really wanted to. We were even skating with it on ice on a simple arm extension. So having the ability to V-mount power your light and simply putting it on your light stand and turning to tighten. What's great now is that I have the added flexibility of battery powering my light. Included in the box is the V-mount plate itself. The clamp is already attached to the V-mount plate, and the cable you'll need to run from D-tap on the plate to power the light. Now let's talk about the price of all the different accessories here. Let's start off with the V-mount plate. For $49, you can get the V-mount plated accessory. I highly recommend getting this accessory because it's going to give you that added flexibility of battery power, especially when you're on location and away from house power. For the RAL65 and RAD55, the cost will be $99. And finally, for the RAD85, the larger softbox, the cost will be $149. Now, at these price points, you really can't beat them. It's going to be so easy to make a kit out of a couple of these lights, 2 daylights for example, and 1 bicolor, as well as multiple accessories. It's all very affordable, but at the same time, really quality oriented. So you're able to get some great products for a great price. And I think that's why SmallRig is entering this market and getting into this next step for their company, because they really want to help the filmmaker. But now let's do something fun. Let's take these lights and these accessories and let's do an interview setup. And let's talk about why you should do a certain type of lighting and what products you should use to get a great cinematic looking interview. So let's jump right on into that. All right, so let's talk about lighting a cinematic interview. To start here, let's talk about a practical. In terms if you were shooting this interview in a house, that would be something like a lamp or any kind of light that is not necessarily lighting your subject, but is in the scene, for example. Usually practicals are taken care of by the art department, but typically a DP will really have a suggestion of what they want to see in a practical. Today for our practical, we are using this old school 2K tungsten light. Now, this thing is a beast. It draws a ton of electricity, but today we just need it as a prop. It's not even actually plugged in. The really funny thing here is we're actually using a SmallRig M160 RGB pocket LED inside here to mimic the old tungsten light. If I close up the Fresnel here on top, you can see how that's mimicking the glow of the old school tungsten light, and that's why this is so important. But now let's move on to some of the lights that are going to be actually in our scene. Let's start off with our backlight here. Now, what's important about the backlight is that that's the light that's going to help pop your subject off the background. It's not necessarily the brightest light in your scene, that's the key light, and we'll get to that in a second here. But as you can see, it's a harder source typically. It's really bright on me, but what it allows us to do is it helps to pop our subject off the background. Now, I don't know if many of you are familiar with, say, art, but a lot of times if you really need to highlight something, you use white light around it, especially if you're dealing with something like a black background, and that white in a pencil paint helps to really pop things. And that's what this light is doing. It is popping me off the background. You'll see the difference when we actually rig it up with a subject. This is a type of lighting that is normally referred to as, say, 3-point lighting: your key light, your backlight, and your fill light. Typically now we want more contrast ratios because of the cameras we're working with, so I typically run with a 2-point lighting system, a backlight and a key light. And I can turn them all on and off with the small Gobo app. Like here, I'm going to turn out the backlight and it's going to get really dark. But if I turn back on that backlight, you can see really how bright it is, and I'm doing that all from my phone. But let's now move over here and let's talk about something really cool that's going on here. This is a projection through what we would call a Gobo. Now this is a really budget way to do this. Normally you would do this from, say, like a Lico or something more high-end, and they're little laser cut aluminum pieces that go into the light itself and into the projection lens. There's a physical glass element in that lens that helps get the projection on the wall. But if you want to do something on a budget and you still want to have a cool logo in the background of your scene, this is a way to do it. So what I've got here is I took SmallRig's logo and I had a shop in town mount it on some vinyl. I gave them the logo and said, hey, I need this to be vinyl cut. So they cut out the logo for me on vinyl, or a giant sticker, if you will. Now, with that, I took the logo and I put it on some plexiglass. It's some see-through plastic, for example. And then half of the SmallRig logo is red. So if we come back here, we can see how I'm achieving that red look. I'm using a piece of what's called gel. Some of our newer filmmakers might not be as familiar with gel as our more advanced filmmakers. What gel is, it's basically how you change the color of something. There are gels for every color in the rainbow. Anything blues, greens, reds, color temperature. If you need more golden, blue, whatever you need, there is a gel for it. So here I'm just using some party red in order to get the red of SmallRig's logo to shine through. Now I'll go into the small Gobo app and I'm going to turn that on. And as you can see on the background there, it's projecting the SmallRig logo. I've taken a few creative liberties with the logo here, but the main goal of this exercise is to demonstrate how to use these lights as well as things like gels to really give your scenes more life. But let's make our way back over to our light here and let's talk about our modifier. Now let's take a look at the snoot. Basically the snoot just helps to cut down on the light. It helps to funnel it out and really just cut it down into this little piece right coming out of there, and that's what I need. And right on the outside here you see some black wrap or some cinefoil. Might be hard to see right now. Let's put it in some light so you can really see what we're doing here. So this black wrap or cinefoil, it's basically aluminum foil that's black. Again, that's going to help us if we need to cut down on a little more light. So we've got it really specific here because this is what we needed to help make sure that there's no spill on the background and we're just getting light where we need it, which is on this logo here. So if I take my snoot here and I'm going to put it back on our RC120D, using that universal Bowens mount, it clicks in just like that. And I'm going to go back to the small Gobo app and I'm going to turn up our intensity here. And you can see how it's shining through. I need to adjust it because I moved it off a little bit. But you can see how it's shining through and onto our background there. Now that's an easy way to create a simple projection into the background. If you've got a company's logo, this is a great way to do it. Let's talk about how we're mounting this up here. If we come over here, we've got a standard C-stand here going into a Gobo head. And then we have what's called a quacker clamp or a duckbill. It's a simple clamp here that clamps down and locks in. Usually a lot of times we'd be using this for something called beadboard, which helps bounce light back onto your subject. But here I'm using it to hold this piece of plexiglass in place to create that nice projection on the background there. This is a really easy way to up your lighting game. If you've got a company you're working for doing some type of corporate video, this is an easy way to get their logo on a background. However, if they've got a more complicated logo than something like simple text and a couple of colors, you might want to think about just using a standard projector. But now let's move on to the most important light in our scene, the key light. And I'm going to start by striking it here in the small Gobo app. The key light is the brightest light in the scene, and it's the main light that's going to be lighting our subject. Here we've got the RAD85, which is our larger softbox, with both the internal diffusion and the external diffusion, as well as grid. And that's going to help cut down on our spill and really create a nice even light for our subject. But now let's see how this actually looks. Let's bring in our gaffer, let's sit him down in this chair, and let's see how he looks on camera. Okay, so then let's talk about this lighting setup here. Let's first start off with our logo, like we demonstrated earlier setting it up. There's the logo behind our subject here. And as you can see, it's really bright there, but when we start adding in more light, it's gonna get more complicated. Let's go to our backlight now. Now, the reason you're seeing so much spill everywhere is because we're in a large studio with a lot of white walls. And when you have white walls, you're gonna see spill off of everything. What you can see is that the light is causing just enough rim on the back of our subject there to really help pop them off the background. Now, this is our gaffer, Justin Usami, who's been really helpful throughout this whole process, but he's not used to being on camera. As you can see, what's on his shoulder there is a light meter. It is a great tool for any gaffers and filmmakers out there because it helps you read the light and tell you what exposure you're at. So as of right now, we just have the logo and the backlight on. We're helping to pop Justin off the background there, and you can also see the practical just off to the right side of frame. You know, just something to make this scene a little bit more interesting than just a plain white wall. Now let's turn on our key light, our brightest light in the scene. You can see that's really bright, and it's pulling a nice far side key, meaning there is contrast throughout his face. The light isn't directly pointing at him, but it's giving just enough so we see a bright side of the face and a darker side of the face. It's called a contrast ratio, and it's something that really helps you if you want to make a better film. Now, if that light was just right in the middle of the frame and it was pointing directly at Justin, you wouldn't have that contrast ratio. And that's something that's really important in film and video, is having that contrast ratio, because it really helps you up your game in lighting. So now let's take it back actually. Let's turn off that logo and let's turn off that backlight. And I'm doing this all remotely in the app, which is really cool. So now that those are both off, you can see that there's just our key light there. You know, it's not quite as interesting if I had on the backlight and I had on that logo, just because it's a plain white wall. The biggest thing you can do in filmmaking is just have an interesting background. The more depth you have in your scene, the more professional the scene will look. So let's turn back on that backlight, and we can see that now we're getting a little more interesting. We have some depth in the lighting. We have that little bit of rim and what I would call kicker, that little bit of light on his cheek there. But then we put that logo in just for a little bit of extra something in the background. You don't want plain white walls when you're working in film. But that's really a basic interview setup. This is something simple yet clean. More times I might want to throw in some other type of color in the background. If I'm working in a studio, I might use some type of sweep, which is basically a really thick paper with some type of color. It really makes the scene a little bit more interesting. But that's how you light a scene. Thank you so much to SmallRig for having me for this global release of the new chip-on-board LED lights. I'm so fortunate to be a part of it. It was a blast creating this video. We had a lot of fun. But I want to thank my crew, because without your crew, you are nothing. A big thank you to the man behind the camera right now, John Butler, our Steadicam operator. My gaffer is Justin Usami, as well as our B-cam operator. And our model today was Henry Bleedsdale on the ice. Thank you so much to everyone for being a part of this great video, and I really hope you all enjoy the brand new lights. Until the next time, we'll see you later.